Here we go. It's we used to actually have a plaque that we handed out to somebody, and I was thinking this year who we could actually recognize for their work in neighborhoods and neighborhood community work. For the last I don't know, 12 years, I've been working in Larchmere, and then also in the neighborhood Shaker Buckeye neighborhood. And you can't work in Shaker Square and Shaker Buckeye neighborhood without running into Ken Johnson. And we certainly did run into Ken. And I think the struggle for us was that he was unresponsive. The neighborhood was struggling. And there was this constant kind of aura over the development corporation that they weren't being honest about what was going on with their books. And there was supposed to have been a merger of the Shad Group and Buckeye, and it never happened because they could never get a clean audit out of it. And along came Mark Naymik, and Mark took on the difficult task of kind of getting inside of what was going on at Buckeye Shaker and with the councilman. And it's a funny story. When he talked to him about it, he said he got into it because he drove by Woodland and saw the trucks with compliments of Ken Johnson on. He wondered how that happened. So I'm incredibly proud of the work that Mark did, because we had a group in Shaker Square, Shaker Buckeye, called Reclaim Ward 4, which is a nascent group of 4 or 5 people, Peggy Gallagher and Michelle Jackson, etc. Really tried to raise the flag about the unresponsiveness of the councilman in the neighborhood. And I think that, along with its residents, made it difficult for people to believe in their government, that they could call up and get a responsiveness to it. And so people really struggled with this. And it was Mark's diligence digging through payroll accounts. I can't even think of anything more boring than payrolls and who signed them and how much and where it was. And it finally ended up being a series in the Plain Dealer before Mark went on to WKYC. Well read, well understood, and finally led our friends at the FBI and the Department of Justice to indict the councilman and have a trial, and we know the results. So I want to turn over to Mark and have his thoughts about what it is to look at one council person. And I will tell you, it had a devastating impact upon the neighborhood. I mean, the voter turnout, 10, 12%. This year we had a debate between the two candidates, and we only had 100 people show up on Zoom. I wish we had had more, but that's what we had. And I think a lot of that depression had to do with the corruption in Ken Johnson's councilmanic office. So I'll turn it over to you, Mark. Are you there?
Yes, I am. Are you guys hearing me okay?
We see you.
Okay,
well,
good. I know
about it.
and the fancy backdrop that I have here at Channel 3. So
Yeah,
this is where
very
where the sausage is made, in the back room.
Yeah, exactly.
I do appreciate the work that you all do and the Ohio Fair Lending Coalition, and then this sort of sub-arm here on the vital counties or statistics and stuff that you guys are chasing within the housing market. Chip just mentioned it when we talked yesterday. We went over a few things, but I think it's worth noting that I was bothering him some 30 years ago when he was a board member at the then Mental Health Board. He reminded me of that, so that goes back to the mid 90s. But I have seen the work that he does, and many of you over the years. You know, I think what the Ken Johnson stories did show us is, I mean, really big picture here, that it isn't just banks that can discriminate against a neighborhood. You had an elected official that his actions ultimately created discrimination. And perhaps the best headline that I can point to is one of the stories in the series that said, Councilman Ken Johnson's favored group stops paying taxes on homes intended to help the poor. And, you know, the details of that, many of you probably know, when they took control of the day-to-day maintenance and management of the houses that were really part of a program that was supposed to be rent to own. They were able to get cash, and this was all done through the Buckeye Shaker Square Development Corporation. And I believe ultimately because they were, under a lot of financial stress as a result of Ken Johnson's actions. But ultimately, we know a lot of people were going to lose their homes that were paying and thought that they were going to do the right thing and get homes. And that we know, sure as Tony and others could tell you, that the council had to pass legislation to basically go back and make right. So I think that headline within the Ken Johnson stories was probably the most relevant to the work that you do, because it had a real direct impact in the neighborhood. As Chip mentioned, I first got into the story simply by wanting to do a column on why the heck city trucks say compliments of Ken Johnson. And we wrote that screwy story, which, again, I can't believe any of it, that somehow this was approved by George Voinovich decades ago and no one ever thought twice of it. But the real story changed when we started hearing from residents and activists about homes that Buckeye Shaker Square had, including one that came from the land bank and ended up in the hands of Ken Johnson's son. And in that story, Ken complained that no one wanted it. As soon as that story was published, a woman who lived next door to that very property contacted me and said that she did reach out, tried to get it, and they sort of lied about it. And that house, by the way, is now kind of in the mix of the post conviction aspects that the U.S. Attorney's Office is taking a look at how it ended up there. But that is one. And then really, it wasn't until I was able to show that the person that was signing the receipts for work done in the ward was not only a city employee, but was a former ward of Ken Johnson. He was a young man that had lived with Ken. And Chip, you mentioned nothing more boring than looking at payroll. Yes, there is. And that is the probate court records to go back and find. I think I had identified 11 young men between the ages of boys, 11 and 13, over 20 years, that Ken had in some shape become a legal guardian to. Didn't adopt, but became their wards, helped a couple of them change their names to his name. Several of them then became employees of the city of Cleveland. And that's when this thing really started to roll forward. But anyway, it lives on online. And we know the end result was that Ken was sentenced to 6 years in prison last month, and was put in handcuffs and taken away the day of the sentence, which I think was a shock to a number of people. But it is that there was, in the end, it was just discrimination towards a neighborhood that needed a better steward of both federal money and working with a neighborhood nonprofit group. And honestly, throughout all of it, it was activists and people constantly reaching out. And I will always say this as a reporter: we're only as good as the sources out there. And if people don't constantly bug us, and we know that's a tough times now, where there are fewer of us, we're not always listening, we're getting caught up in lighter and lighter stories. This one obviously had a great personality to it, and that kind of drove some of it, but in the end, it was just so egregious, it had to be out there. And I just a final couple of points on the need for journalism. Again, it starts with good sources. Social media makes it easier for people to ignore media because they can communicate directly with the constituents. We see that in politics, especially. And newsrooms are much smaller. When I started at the Plain Dealer in 2000, there were more than 300 editorial employees, editors, librarians, researchers, reporters. When I left there about 2.5 years ago, Plain Dealer and its digital arm, maybe 60-ish, and there's fewer even today. So it is a challenge. And I think, as the federal judge said after the sentencing, that we need to keep doing this because officials often can get away with things without the attention. So that motivated me to keep going. And you guys can all reach me at Mark Naymik at WKYC for further tips and stories that I'll be happy to chase. But I guess I'll leave it at that. But I'm appreciative of the recognition, and more importantly, for the work that you guys were all doing in that neighborhood. I just wish City Hall powers had paid attention sooner.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate the comments and the thoughts. There's a better day ahead, hopefully, for Buckeye Shaker. There's a new councilwoman, Deborah Gray, will be starting off, I can't remember what it is, January 2nd or 3rd or whatever it is. And we'll be working with her as well as our other council person, Blaine Griffin. And hopefully better days ahead for Buckeye Woodland Shaker and better days ahead for the city of Cleveland. But again, much thanks for your reporting. It's one of the best stories I've ever read. And gosh, Blaine, the other part of the story about the homes is he had to buy them back too. City paid twice for them. Just unbelievable. So much thanks.